Okay, away you go, Zoe. Everybody's ready for you.
Okay,
You.
hi everybody. I'm Zoe. I'm a second year midwifery student at the University of Worcester. And I'm just going to run through the webfolio I made through my first year at university last year. So here it is. Our degree is set out in blocks. So we have a block of theory and then we have a block of placement. And this helps to set out a spiral effect for learning. So we begin with a kind of general foundation knowledge, and then periodically we revisit this knowledge to add more depth to it. We also learn in an inquiry-based way. So our tutor gives us a chosen topic, and we go away and work in groups to research that topic, and then we reconvene and present our findings to the rest of the cohort. So this sets us up for being evidence-based practitioners when we qualify. So we're required to become really efficient at researching and critically analysing the research to see if it's worthy of changing our future midwifery practice. So in our first year, before we went into placement, we were asked to write about how we plan to become lifelong learners. And that means kind of becoming really proficient at researching and appraising the quality of research. And when we had to do this mandatory bit of writing, we had to analyse our personality and all of our previous life experiences to see how best we could achieve this. So this is my piece of writing here. I'm trying to get rid of that there. So I talk about my previous work where I used to do photography and a little bit of graphic design, and how I've kind of related those skills to midwifery. A bit about emotional intelligence and reflection, which like Andy was saying is a crucial bit of being a healthcare practitioner. And because I hadn't actually been into practice yet, I decided to just do an example of a reflection on my own birth experience here. So I've got a link here. And I used an image-rich timeline to illustrate what happened in the birth here. So obviously you can't read all of that, but then I interpreted that using a reflective model, as you can see here. So it's really easy to kind of just click in between the two. And then later on in the year, after spending some time in practice, in community and on the labour ward, we were asked to complete our webfolio by choosing a topic that stood out to us in practice. They said we could either write an essay, critique some local guidelines, or create a poster, or do a poem. So it's quite open, really. And I chose to do an essay and a visual aid. And I chose to research occipito-posterior labour, OP labour, which is when the baby's back is turned towards the woman's back instead of at the front, which is the optimal position for birth, really. So OP babies, hang on, I'll just open my essay. Here we go. OP babies can make labour a lot longer and less consistent and much more painful for women, therefore leading to far more medical interventions such as epidural, forceps, and unsatisfactory birth experiences. So in my essay, I discussed the importance of detecting an OP baby and how the midwife can work in partnership with the woman in order to prevent medical intervention and all of its negative consequences. So here's my essay. And to support my essay, I decided to do a visual aid for midwives in the labour room. Here we go, to prompt them of ways to help women get through that longer labour experience. This is my poster here. There we go. And then we were asked to round up the whole webfolio at the end of our first year, after we'd been through all our theory blocks, all our placement blocks. And we were asked to write a commentary, which pulls together everything we learned throughout the year. So I'll just find that. Here's my commentary. So I wrote in the first person and detailed how my lifelong learning skills had developed throughout the year, and what else I needed to do in theory and practice to develop myself as an evidence-based midwife. As you can see here, I've linked back to what we call patches, because the patches make up the webfolio. So I can link back, so it's all very coherent. There we go. So when we first started uni, we were given probably 1 to 2 sessions on how to use PebblePad, which I found more than enough, really, because it's all quite self-explanatory. And so far I find that PebblePad works really well with exploring lifelong learning, because the webfolio evolves with your learning and it shows a process of thought which is easily followed by the people. And because it was so easy to use, I didn't have to spend time figuring out how to use it. I was spending all of my time on my academic work, which is what I needed to do. We also use PebblePad to create a professional portfolio, like Andy was showing, in which each year we have to get essential skills signed off by our sign-off mentor in practice. And it's great because we can just share our portfolio with them so they can look at it when they're not so busy at work, or I can sit there with them and kind of go through it. And generally it just prepares us for creating an ongoing portfolio for when I eventually become a midwife. So yeah, that's it really. If there's any questions.
Thanks, Zoe. That was really interesting, and I can see some questions coming in already.
Okay.
And one of them is about how did you add your essay and commentary? Did you use PebblePad directly?
Yes, I did. Yeah, because the great thing about PebblePad is you're not going to lose the work. Because I'm always worried when I write an essay just on my computer that if something goes wrong with the hard drive, that's it, I've lost it. But yeah, I've started now just writing them on PebblePad, so I haven't got that worry anymore.
Okay, and Andy's asking, are you going to continue to develop this as you move to being a practicing midwife?
Yeah, definitely. It's so easy to use, and it's going to be, like Andy showed, it's going to be great when I eventually apply for jobs. I think it probably make me stand out more if I'm against people that aren't using it. So yeah, definitely. Okay. I think it's going to be really good as well for my dissertation, my independent study in year 3, because it's just going to show development and everything. So yeah.
I'm just going to unmute Andy as well, so you can join in the conversation, Andy, if there's anything you wanted to add. There's a question here about was your work actually marked online, and if so, was it easy to access feedback?
Is that for me? Sorry, is that question? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
So it was about, was your work marked online as well by the academic?
Oh yes. Yes, there's like a little comments icon, and they can mark it online, and you can see what all of your feedback on the webfolio. So it's really easy to go back to in the future and see what to improve on and everything.
I have to say that I've just marked 70 submissions on PebblePad for my Pathophysiology assignment, and it was marked in Atlas. And what my students really liked was the fact that as well as the scorecard we used for marking, which made it very clear to them where their marks had been allocated. We also did audio feedback, which again is easily attached to the marking sheet. So again, they can listen to the feedback that I gave as I was reading through it. Although one student did point out that I did yawn very loudly, go quiet for a while, and there's some soft snoring in the background. So that was a bit embarrassing.
There is another question from Joy, Zoe, that I don't think we've answered yet. How did you add your essay and commentary? Did you type directly into PebblePad or did you upload it?
Yeah, I typed directly into it. Yeah, it's much better because then you know you're not going to lose your work or anything. So. Okay,
and it looks, Zoe, just from my point of view as well, that you had a number of tasks to complete at the request of the programme leads that has actually turned into something that has become a more personal portfolio.
Yeah, definitely, and yeah, I can see myself using it kind of throughout the course. Well, I'm already kind of gathering all of my certificates and my reflections and everything in a separate portfolio ready for when I start applying for jobs. So yeah.
Excellent.
I think that's the key thing with it as well, is to make it not just an assessment tool, but something the student can invest in and has value to them and adds value to them as a clinician when it comes to going out there into the marketplace.
Okay. I think Claire from Sheffield Hallam's just asking, did you use a post for the essay or a template or a webfolio? How did you go about getting that essay into the page?
I'm trying to think now. I think I used, I started a new webfolio and then just added new pages. Yeah. And then obviously changed like the backgrounds and everything to fit in.
Yeah, it looks like it's a large text box that just expanded as you typed. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Gabby's asking a question, Andy, that's perhaps for you about open badges.
Yes. Yeah, we did use open badges. The students had to produce evidence that they'd completed certain mandatory training elements, such as moving and handling, basic life support, infection control, before they're allowed to go out into placement. So some of them, because we get people coming in from areas where they've already been in clinical practice, they will have certificates, so they just upload the certificates onto the webfolio. But those are the students who actually do either the e-learning on things like fire safety or attend the basic life support training. Then we issue open badges, which again they have to attach that. So within the portfolio template they get on day one, there is a section on a nested workbook, which is their mandatory training. So there's a different page within the nested workbook for each of the elements of the mandatory training, and they have to add a reflection on what they did and some evidence to show that they've completed it. So it can either be the certificate or the open badge. It's still a little bit clunky getting the open badges into PebblePad, but I understand that's all going to be smoothed over in the near future.
Okay, I think Shane's joined us from Australia. Welcome, Shane.
Good day.
Sorry there. And I wonder if you can have a go at it for us. What arguments would you use to persuade reluctant tutors to begin using PebblePad with their students? And good job you're not on camera, Shane.
Is that for Andy or?
Have a go at that, Zoe.
Oh gosh.
I think you did say it was easy to use.
Yeah, it's easy to use. All of my tutors really are au fait with it, and I guess because they're out of like working in the healthcare setting themselves, it kind of keeps them on the ball, and it's just going to help all the future students coming through. So it's going to improve the employability of the students, which is going to reflect well on the university.
I think also it's about finding the short-term wins. You know, what is it that is going to be useful to the tutors, to the instructors. I've just changed all the OSCE objective structured clinical examination sheets from being a paper-based assessment sheet to being a PebblePad workbook. So now when the students have their OSCEs, the assessors all have iPads, so they just simply click on this, they go into the Atlas space, click on the student that they're marking, select the OSCE sheet that they're actually doing, and then as they observe the OSCE, they just click all the check markers to set the things from being either not demonstrated, demonstrated and not competent, or demonstrated and competent, sign it off at the end. And then, because one of the big things was, first of all, they had to do all the printing of the OSCE sheets before, and bear in mind we've got 70 students doing maybe 10 OSCEs in one day. So there's all the photocopying to be done beforehand, and then somebody's got to manually sort all the paperwork out at the end and group it together so each student's got all their OSCEs together, and then it's got to be filed somewhere. And then you've got the issues around you know, if you need to find evidence for that student again in the future. Well, now, because they're all as a workbook assigned to the student in Atlas, they remain there forever. They're automatically sorted into student group, and all you've got to do is just scroll down and just check that they're all signed off as competent. So for those students in learning and practice teaching, that was a great seller for them because it made their life so much easier.
Yeah, and I think David's also made a good point here, how it's important that the tutors use it. They don't have to be experts, but if they do use it, it's a really good model for good practice. Ellen, how is it enabled? I assume the assignments need to be set. Not quite sure. Was that aimed for you, Andy? Oh, read previous question. Was that audio feedback? No. All right, I might have to sit and deliberate on this one. I just wondered if Andy could perhaps answer the question for us on how he manages the audio feedback.
So yeah, we have just a straightforward dictaphone that we were issued when we started at the university that nobody ever seems to use. So as I sit there and read through their PebblePad workbook, I have the dictaphone in my hand. And just keep sort of pausing it and unpausing it when I make a comment. At the end of these dictaphones that we've got, I've got a USB thing that comes out the bottom. You just plug it straight into the laptop and upload it straight onto the assessment, the feedback section of the workbook. It's ever so easy.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to Ellen's question in a moment because it's a little bit more complex, but there's another one here. How often and how well have you or your students used non-text-based multimedia features of PebblePad in individual portfolios or in projects? And has the mobile apps, there's two questions here, increased or enhanced use of PebblePad? Can I go to Zoe first?
Sorry, what does she mean? I'm trying to read it.
Have you used anything else other than text? Have you used video?
Shall I jump in while Zoe's thinking? Or you?
Yeah, please do, Andy, while Zoe has a think, and we'll come back to Zoe. Okay,
so the assignments I was just talking about, the ones I've marked, the Pathophysiology Assignments. Now, before I took over the Pathophysiology module, and for anybody who's not clinical, I do apologise, it's about the understanding of the biological basis of disease. So the previous incumbent of my position gave them, and so they have to do a case study or 3 case studies. So originally it was just a piece of A4 paper that said, please discuss the pathophysiology of a patient presenting with left ventricular heart failure. Now, because it's on a PebblePad workbook, they get an actual case study, so they get to see Within the workbook, first of all, they get a video introduction from me that tells them exactly what they need to do. So it stops them having to ring me up repeatedly and saying, what do I need to do for this question? They just need to go back and watch the video. But then, so within the workbook, there are 3 tabs, one for each question. They get a video introduction, so they see the initial consultation between the paramedic and the patient. Then they get a set of demographics about the patient. And then they get things like they'll get an audio file so they can listen to the respiratory pattern of the patient. They can listen to the heart sounds of the patient. There's an embedded video file that lets them view the patient's ECG on the monitor. So by using those sort of multimedia elements, as it were, it gives them a much more three-dimensional case study to discuss. I just think it adds to the reality of what they're talking about.
Okay.
So that's one example.
Zoe, did you use anything other than just text?
I haven't, but actually you've given me a good idea for when I do my my dissertation, or if I ever do some of my own independent research. Audio would be really helpful, because in midwifery, qualitative data is much more what's the word? It's much kind of more relevant than quantitative. So if I did like interviews with women about their experiences of birth or something, then I could show that on PebblePad along with all the findings and kind of link it in. So yeah, that's given me a good idea actually.
Yeah, and
I think I can speak from a student perspective as well, because I'm currently doing my PGC, and one of the things we had to do was a reflective account of our teaching experience, and it's a 3,000 word assignment, and like most students, I'm eager to do as little work as possible, so I actually did a video recording for my reflection rather than typing out a reflective piece, and added it into a webfolio, and I've actually presented my whole assignment for my PG cert as a webfolio.
Excellent. The only other thing we've noticed recently as well is that the PebblePad app has enabled anybody with a microphone on their keyboard to also record directly and translate it into text. And that's quite a useful tool that some of the people at Cumbria have been using.
Well, that sounds good.
Certainly for my students as well. If they're on a working on an ambulance, obviously you go from one job to another very quickly. So if they want to record something that they need to reflect on later, then they can do it very, very quickly by just going onto the app, recording themselves. And I spoke to you about this the other day, Debs, that some of them want to be able to do a video recording, audio recording rather than video recording, because they don't like them looking at themselves. I just tell them to stick some blue tack over the camera. But again, it allows them to do it very quickly. It's very contemporaneous, because reflection should be about the emotions as well as about the actual events. And it's easier to reflect on your emotions when they're still raw and they're still evident. So again, it just adds to the reality of the realism, of their reflections.
Yeah, and encouraging timely recording of learning at the time it happens, which is very relevant to those sorts of professions as well.
And as Claire just pointed out, we've made them very, very very aware of patient confidentiality.
Yeah, no, that's all very good. Have we got any more questions for the presenters? One other thing I was just going to run by you, Zoe. You said you had very little training, but you didn't feel you needed it. Is that something that's also a benefit to getting tutors to use it with their students?
Yeah. It's kind of I'd say the younger people in the cohort find it pretty easy, because I guess we've grown up with this kind of technology, and I'd say the older people were kind of like hesitant about using it, a bit worried about using it, but actually have been totally fine once they actually challenged themselves and got on with it. They were fine using it. So yeah. Sorry, what's the second part of your question?
I think you've answered it actually. Really, it was around that you didn't have a lot of training, but you were able to get on and do what you needed to do as part of the program.
I think once you actually get on with the task in hand, then it all comes together and it's easy to use. So yeah.
And Andy, is that the same for your students? Do they have much face-to-face training up front?
It's funny because one of the things I said right at the beginning of my session was I found it very intuitive when I first got onto Pebble Classic and I was trying to navigate my way around it and find out how to do things. I didn't find it particularly difficult to work out how to do what I needed to do. Students, I guess, again, and I'm going to get myself into trouble here now, a lot of my students on the paramedic course are mature students. And a lot of them are very fond of flinging their arms in the air and saying, "Oh, I don't do technology." And I've got one particular student who's on the cohort at the moment who, when we started, has quite significant dyslexia, was completely technophobic, but now she absolutely loves her PebblePad portfolio.
Yeah, and that's good to hear because we have had some good feedback from a student who actually had a particular dyslexic disability, and was able to say, actually having a PebblePad has given me a voice, and that's actually been enhancing. So that's good to hear.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm just wondering then if maybe we can sum up some final thoughts. Zoe, thank you very much for presenting. It's been really interesting and useful, I think, to the audience. So I'm wondering if you could perhaps give us a little sum up.
So I've basically found PebblePad really effective for ongoing learning and building up my own personal experiences and competencies, and I'm going to continue using it right into my professional career. Yeah, I recommend it.
Excellent, and we wish you all the best with that, and I'm sure it's probably not the last time we ask to involve you in any of our PebblePad events, Zoe.
Thank you.
Andy, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, just for me, I obviously I found it not by accident, but by chance, I suppose, and sort of fell in love with it right at the beginning, and my enthusiasm for it, I think, rubs off on my students. I do demonstrate my webfolio, and they've all accessed it. So I think sometimes seeing something that is in practice and again, as I say, a living, breathing entity that somebody continues to work on, I think really helps them to understand the benefits of it.
Okay, I think quite a few people agreeing with you there, Andy.
Yeah,
make a big difference to engagement, and I'd echo that because that's exactly how I would have implemented PebblePad with students.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Dave was just asking a question about referencing on PebblePad, and obviously my students just reference their work exactly as they do normally. So at the end of on the workbooks, when they're filling in their answers, then they put their references at the end of that section. But again, one of the advantages to PebblePad, and I encourage them to do, is that they can hyperlink direct to the resource as well. So if I want to check up on a reference that a student's given me and it's hyperlinked, I don't have to go and find it. I can just click on that hyperlink and it takes me straight to the reference that they were using. And depending on your university or your individual contracts, you either may or may not have access to turn it in as well via your PebblePad account.
Okay, that's excellent. So I'm going to sort of wind up now, and if there are any continuing questions, we pick those up and we'll carry them forward into the chat room.
Would it help if we gave our email address if anybody wants to ask questions sort of in the future?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to put those as a link in the community site. Beth and I can do that today. And we will be getting the recording up as quickly as possible because there are a number of people who couldn't actually get in the room today. We want to be sure that they can have the same experience we've had from two very good presentations. So thanks.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening.
Andy, thank you, Zoe, and thank you all of the participants. And take note, tweet chat tonight, 8 o'clock. Hashtag PebblePad chat. You'll find, I guess, quite a few of the PebblePad team there tonight, and hopefully some of you will be able to be involved as well. So thank you. I'll
be there, Dave, don't worry. I'm going to go and finish my tree house now.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.